Alright, serious question. Where's your story located at? Alright, what's going on, everybody? It's Alan Thomas, aka Shadow Assassins, and today I'm talking about basically something that if I could go back and redo my webcomic Shadow Assassins at the beginning, one thing I probably would change is not necessarily change, but I would have planned out better. That's where my environments were, and specifically what they even looked like. I really didn't take into account until part of the way in my comic making process, and it probably would have saved me a lot of time had I did this in the beginning, and it would have made my comic look better because this stuff would have been planned out had I decided what places were gonna be in my comic from the start. Now, if you're doing a simple comic where your characters are just sitting around at somebody's house or talking in a cafe or something like that, it would still be best to sort of map out what those actual places are going to look like. But you can kind of also, depending on what your style of drawing is, you could get away with simplifying that a little bit more. Then again, maybe not. All I know is it's really a good idea to know what these places are going to look like before you draw them. Just to give you an example, my comic takes place in a fictional area, but it's sort of vast, but you wouldn't be able to tell that at some points of my comic because some of the areas look very similar, and that especially in the beginning, and that comes from me not really mapping out what everything looked like. I knew what I kind of wanted my comic to look like, but I didn't necessarily figure out what was in it, where everything was in relation to something else. Like, I didn't actually map out my world. Now, some people don't have to do that. They sort of have everything in their heads. More power to them. I'm not capable of that, and I know a lot of people that aren't. So if I were you, I would sort of have, even if it's like a small base map of where everything is supposed to be at, I would probably keep that in mind. Just what certain buildings look like in significant places. I'm not saying you need to know what every nook and cranny of your environment is going to look like. It may help, but that might be going overboard. But just significant areas of your comic, map out and draw, if you have to, what those areas look like. Or type up a paragraph or a page or something and figure out just in description what those places are supposed to look like. What's in them? What's outside of the buildings? Are there signs outside of the buildings? Are there neon lights, or is it just a regular billboard? Does it even have a door? Does it have windows? Just figuring out little stuff inside the comic so that you know what everything's supposed to look like. Like, it'll really help. And it'll also prevent this from happening too. I have little spots in my own comic, and I've actually noticed this in some other people's as well, where an environment will look a certain way at one point, and when you revisit that later on in the story, it looks a little different. Either there's more detail added, which is not a bad thing, or there's missing details, and that comes from not having a place really planned out from the start. Now, obviously, you're not going to have a ton of details in every single panel in every environment that you draw in the story. Like, sometimes the actual background is not necessary for the panels you're drawing, but certain significant elements should be there just to let people know where they're looking at. Even stuff like that, like landmarks, anything to sort of make the environment stand out and make your world stand out too, so it's not just your characters, I should say, in some space, or your characters in a void in a sense, because you don't want it to seem like your characters are just at some random buildings, but at the same time you don't want to make it seem like they're in the middle of nowhere where nothing's around either. Unless it's supposed to be. If that's intentional, run with it, but if not, you probably want to map out those pieces of your environment. Like I say, I got plenty of examples in my story where the environment there's a lack of detail there simply because I put no thought in the beginning of how certain places were going to look. Or I had certain scenes in my mind, so I knew what was supposed to be in the scene, so I sort of wrapped my environment around that, but it still didn't really explain what was around. If that makes any sense. It probably didn't, I don't know. But like, basically what I'm getting at is try to map out what your world looks like. It's good to have your story, it's good to have your characters and the way they look and all that other stuff, but take a bit of the same loving care that you put into your characters in the environment as well, is basically what I'm saying, because it'll help you in the long run, and it'll help your viewers as well. But that's just my rant. I just thought about that looking back at some old pages from Shadow Assassins myself recently, and I wanted to give this little bit of advice to other people so that they don't make the same mistakes that I made when I started out. And hopefully this will help people even if they're currently making the same mistakes and improve upon them now. But anyways, I'm rambling again. I'm about to get back to work. I will see you all later. Have a good one, and I'm out.